Hey guys, tonight we travel back to a world without electricity, pop music, or even the concept of weekends. You're about to cross an ocean, barefoot in your soul, probably seasick in your body, chasing something called freedom, even though you're not quite sure what it tastes like yet. Imagine this. The year is 1683. The sky over your small Palatine village hangs heavy with wood smoke and unspoken trauma. War has passed through too many times. The fields are tired, your neighbors exhausted, and rumors of another round of taxes or soldiers are already swirling. You live in a place where even the chimney leans from carrying too much sorrow. So you pack up. Not everything, just what you can carry. Some salted rye bread, a carved spoon, a psalm book with pages damp from your wife's tears. The rest you sell or give away. And you sign a paper written in a language you barely read, promising passage to a far-off land whose name changes every time someone says it. You probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop your location and local time in the comments. I'd love to know where in the world or night you are. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The ship waits in Rotterdam. You board by plank, nervous, clutching a tin cup that will soon taste of moldy water and whatever stew they serve on odd-numbered days. The deck creaks beneath your shoes. Well, they used to be shoes. The toes are open now. You step over a crying woman from Würzburg and duck past a Swiss man arguing with a pigeon. For nearly 3 months, you live in damp shadow. Everyone smells like boiled cabbage and wool. The sea doesn't roll gently. It lurches. You sleep wedged between crates, bundled in every piece of fabric you own. The babies cry at night, and the rats have no shame. You give up on dignity sometime around week 4. Right after you vomit into your own hat, and no one even looks twice. Still, somehow, you get used to it. Your hands grow calloused from helping on deck. You learn a few Dutch curses, not on purpose. A man dies. A baby is born. You start singing again, not for joy, but because singing makes people remember they're human. Historians still argue whether the captain was a saint or a drunk with decent instincts. Either way, he sails you straight into the Delaware Bay in late fall. You arrive in America, not with a flag, but with a limp. Philadelphia is not the glittering port someone described in that pamphlet. It's mostly trees and smoke and mud. And yet, there's something else. Something you hadn't felt since childhood. A space in the air, like the land is still listening for what you'll become. You stagger onto the docks. Your knees are weak. You swear you smell cinnamon, but it might just be someone's beard oil. You thank the captain, who's too busy yelling at someone to notice. And then you turn. You walk toward the woods with a handful of other Germans, 1 Quaker translator, and exactly 0 maps. It's only a few miles to Germantown, but each step feels like a hymn, a dare, and a prayer. You pass other settlers along the road. Some smile, others squint, unsure if you're here to trade or steal. You don't blame them. You're carrying axes and wearing clothes that look like they fought a bear and lost. When you reach the clearing, you stop. No trumpets, no ribbon cutting. Just a few log frames rising like ribs from the earth. Welcome home. Your first night in the new world is cold. You huddle beside a fire that snaps like it's trying to speak. The stars above here are wider, looser somehow. They don't stare down at you like the ones back in Europe. These stars seem curious. Someone brews a fin broth. A child throws pine cones at a squirrel. You sit, sore and stunned. And for a moment, just a moment, you believe this might work. Then a raccoon steals the last of the bread. You wake up to your breath clouding the air. a damp wool blanket tangled around your legs, and the slow realization that the hard shape under your back is, in fact, a root. It's morning in America, a bright and spongy kind of morning, the kind where dew soaks through your soles before you even have a chance to regret getting up. The birds around here don't chirp, they perform. Whole symphonies of whistles and screeches weave through the pines. You hear something that sounds like a rooster imitating a drunk blacksmith, and then you realize it is a rooster. Nobody knows who brought it, possibly the Lord himself. Germantown is not yet much of a town. It's a clearing barely carved from Pennsylvania forest, muddy in every direction, buzzing with mosquitoes and half-formed plans. The only road is a wheel-rutted path the settlers call Main Street, though it's mostly just a suggestion lined with piles of lumber, scattered tools, and one man named Jorg who still sleeps in a barrel. There are 16 families here now. Names like Opdengraf, Hager, and Pastorius, spoken in sleepy Rhineland dialects, echo between half-finished houses. Most are still living in huts or lean-tos built from felled trees. Some wrap their roofs in hides, others in faith. Rain comes through either way. Today, you help raise a neighbor's walls. That's the deal. No one builds alone. Logs are notched and stacked, spiked with handmade wooden pegs and sealed with moss, mud, and good intentions. Your palms blister under the weight of rough pine, but no one complains. Complaining is for evenings. For now, you grunt and sweat and lift in rhythm with the others, your boots sinking into the soft earth like it's trying to eat your ankles. A breeze stirs the treetops, and for a moment, you catch a whiff of pine resin and boiled cabbage, the scent of new beginnings. Later, you squat beside the fire with two other men, one a butcher by trade, the other a cooper's apprentice who wants to be a poet. All three of you share a tin cup of weak beer and a hunk of bread so dense it could double as a roof tile. It doesn't matter. It's warm, it's shared, and it sticks to your ribs. You chew in silence, watching the smoke curl up into a sky far bigger than any sky you knew back home. In the distance, smoke rises from other homesteads, proof that other hearts are burning, other bellies warming. It feels like progress. It feels like something your grandchildren might one day brag about without understanding how many splinters it took. The Lenape people pass nearby, quiet as ghosts. They move through the woods like they're part of the trees. You don't speak the same language, but they nod. Sometimes they offer you fish or show you how to track deer prints in wet ground. Other times, they just look and leave. A few of your neighbors talk about them with fear, others with awe. You try to listen more than you talk, which you suspect might be the secret to not dying stupidly. One Lenape woman, face lined like bark, hands your daughter a carved wooden comb. Your daughter beams. Later, you see her bury it under her mattress like treasure, because it is. Historians still argue whether these first years of Germantown were acts of courage, desperation, or beautiful delusion. You wonder, lying in your creaky bed at night, if it can be all three. Rain sets in by midweek and doesn't stop. The kind of steady, shoulder-tapping rain that soaks through everything, your roof, your socks, your bones. You spend your days digging trenches to keep the water out of your house and your nights trying to keep the fire from going out. One morning, you wake up with mushrooms growing near the hearth. You name one of them Wolfgang. He lasts 3 days. Even in this soggy chaos, life moves forward. A baby is born to the Zimmermans, and the entire town gathers under a makeshift canopy to sing psalms while the infant wails like he knows what's coming. A boy breaks his arm climbing a tree and gets it set with willow bark and linen. He cries once, then demands soup. He will likely run for mayor someday. You begin learning English, or rather the colony's version of it. Your vocabulary grows slowly. Shovel, fence, trade, ouch, tax. You practice under your breath while chopping wood. Sometimes you get it right.
Sometimes you accidentally ask for foot cheese instead of footpath. No one corrects you. They're too busy making the same mistakes. You send a letter back to your cousin in Frankfurt. You describe the land as green and wild, the people as strong, and the sky as infinite. You do not mention the mosquitoes or the time your wife found a snake in the flour barrel. Some truths can wait. Your house finally feels like a home. It leaks less. It smells of cedar and onion and the faint sweetness of homemade soap. You carve your name above the doorframe, not because you think it'll last forever, but because for once, you want to leave something behind that isn't running away from something else. At night, you sit outside on a stump that has earned the honor of being called a chair. The air smells like rain and pine. Somewhere in the woods, an owl calls once. Then again, you sip a thin broth and feel your pulse slow, your breath deepen. And in the dark, you think, this place doesn't quite love you yet, but it doesn't hate you either. And that, for now, is more than enough.
You learn quickly that being not quite English in an English colony is like showing up to a dance where everyone speaks a different rhythm and pretending you already know the steps. You shuffle, you smile, you say yes when you should have said what and hope nobody notices. Spoiler, they always notice. Philadelphia might be a growing port city, but it's still mostly English, mostly Quaker, and mostly confused about what to do with a wagon load of Germans who dress like forest druids and insist on greeting people with 3-minute prayers. You walk into the town square once, trying to trade linen thread for iron nails, and leave with a sack of cornmeal and no idea what just happened. Still, trade starts to bloom. You bring butter, wool, carved toys, smoked meats, things your people know how to make with aching hands and patient hearts. In return, the English give you salt, tobacco, axes, and something called rum, which you try once and decide is just expensive fire. You build a shed behind your cabin and fill it with planks, barrels, tools, and so many turnips it begins to smell like a monastery's basement. Your wife weaves flax on the porch, humming old hymns while the children chase chickens across what's supposed to be your vegetable garden. You shout in German, forget they only speak a little, then resort to waving a ladle around. Universal parenting. A visiting Quaker woman tries to explain the local currency system. You smile politely, then go back to bartering loaves of rye for candle molds and beeswax. Coins feel like fiction out here. It's bread and bark that keep things running. There's an unspoken tension when you visit town. English colonists smile a little too tightly. They ask where you're from, then ask again as if the answer will change. You say Krefeld or the Palatinate, and they nod like that explains everything. It doesn't. Sometimes you say Germany, even though that's not really a thing yet. Just a collection of duchies and regrets. They call you Dutch sometimes, which is both wrong and hilarious. You nod and accept it because correcting people who think your lederhosen are from Holland is a waste of breath you could be using to chop firewood. One day, your neighbor Franz walks into town wearing a waistcoat he found floating in the river. It's too small, too shiny, and probably belonged to a drowned aristocrat. Still, he struts through the square like he owns the colony. People stare. A child cries. You never let him live it down. Historians still argue whether these early interactions shaped German-American identity or just taught your ancestors to keep their heads down and their gardens excellent. Either way, you adapt. You soften your vowels. You let the kids practice English phrases by the firelight, even if they still pronounced church like chorch. You try your best to fit in, but you never stop being German. Not really. It clings to you, in the way you stack firewood just so, in the way your wife lines the pantry with neat jars, in how you measure the world in loaves baked and fences mended. There's something comical about how hard you try to explain things to people who aren't listening. You once spent 30 minutes describing sauerkraut to a merchant who thought you were offering pickled sheep. He bought it anyway, said it tasted like war and cabbage. One English preacher visits Germantown to hold a Sunday sermon.
He frowns at your wood-carved benches, your bare walls, and your choir of women singing in 5-part harmony. Then he smiles and says, "Well, at least the roof doesn't leak." It does, but not today. Winter bites hard. The roads to town freeze. Your beard grows icicles. You huddle near the hearth with your family, passing down stories, prayers, and sour little apples that survive the cellar. The snow outside is deep enough to lose a child in. You consider it briefly during the 3rd week of cabin fever. By candlelight, you reread the worn pages of Luther's Bible. You trace the ink with a cracked finger and whisper verses as the fire snaps behind you. In this strange land, scripture sounds even older, even truer. You wonder if it echoes differently in these trees. Your oldest son builds a sled out of fence posts. It works too well. He flies down a slope, loses control, crashes through someone's outhouse, and becomes a Germantown legend. You consider writing a letter home just to brag. Speaking of letters, you try to send another one to your cousin back in Ulm. This time you include a hand-drawn map of the colony, a pressed acorn leaf, and a recipe for pickled turnips. You don't know if it'll reach him, but if it does, he'll know 2 things. 1, you're alive, and 2, you still remember the taste of home. Neighbors become friends, then family. You build each other's barns, share meat during hard months, and raise roofs while your children play tag with hammers. One night you hear a fiddle from across the clearing, then another. Then someone starts clapping, offbeat but enthusiastic. You join in. No one cares about the language. Everyone understands music. And just when you think you've settled into something like peace, the geese return. Dozens of them. Loud, angry, territorial geese who claim your yard and chase your wife with unholy confidence. You declare war, lose twice, then finally make a deal involving breadcrumbs and a truce line marked in chalk. You laugh more than you used to. Not because life is easier, it's not, but because laughing makes the weight shift, makes the days feel a little less endless. You learn to find joy in the absurd. A pig stuck in a barrel, a snowman that looks like your neighbor Klaus, or your daughter announcing she wants to be a cabbage priest when she grows up. Somehow, through trial and turnip, you're no longer a stranger here. The land doesn't look like Germany. The people don't talk like your cousins. But your hands remember the motions, your heart remembers the hymns, and your feet, finally, stop aching when you walk home. And that, for now, is more than enough.
By now, you've earned a reputation. The Germans make the best bread, the strongest wool, and the most questionable sausages anyone has ever tasted. Not bad for a community that showed up in muddy boots and built homes from the kind of trees that used to terrify you at night. Your days are no longer consumed with mere survival. They're filled with making, hands constantly busy, hearts slightly steadier. You plant rye and barley in tight furrows that almost look like poetry from above. Your wife sings while kneading dough in the mornings. And if she's in a good mood, she lets you sneak a corner of crust before it cools. Bread is a language of its own here. Everyone has their way. Some bake thick loaves with a bark-like crust. Others twist their dough into braids or press herbs between folds. One woman in the village insists she can taste lies in bread. People don't argue with her. You just chew slower around her house. At the edge of the clearing, someone builds a loom the size of a wagon. It groans like an old preacher, but it works. You begin trading finished cloth with townsfolk down in Philadelphia. Warm gray wool dyed with onion skins or elderberries. You wrap your children in it. You line your boots with it. You joke that if the winter wind cuts through it, you'll just grow thicker skin. The younger boys experiment with spinning wheels, while your neighbor Peter insists he can build a cider press out of an old cart and 2 river stones. He can't, but the cider tastes okay once you spit out the splinters.
fringe detail of the week? There's a man named Jacob who's been quietly building what he calls a clock that will predict moon moods. No one knows what that means, but he carved a little wooden goat on top, so everyone nods and pretends to be impressed. The sausage game? Controversial. Your own family recipe involves juniper berries and whispers. You hang links from the rafters to dry while your wife rolls her eyes, saying they look like necklaces for a very dangerous grandmother. When a visiting Quaker tries a piece and immediately needs to sit down, you consider that a triumph. Historians still argue whether early German ingenuity was rooted in cultural pride or simple desperation. When your shovel breaks and you repair it with a split spoon and old belt buckle, you don't care which it is. It works. That's enough. You also begin crafting little machines. Nothing fancy, just levers and pulleys, rotating spits for roasting meat, ratchet winches to lift barrels, clever hooks for closing doors without leaving bed. You chuckle as the English refer to it all as over-engineering. You call it not freezing to death in February. Trade expands. You load bundles of textiles, jugs of pickled cabbage, and jars of apple butter onto wooden carts. Some are sold, others bartered for sugar, books, even a new axe forged in Boston. Your son is obsessed with it. You catch him stroking the handle like it's a prized horse. You build a smokehouse behind your home, thick with hickory and secrets. Inside, ham slabs and summer sausages sway like a congregation of well-dressed ghosts. Every so often, you swear you see one nod. Might be the fumes. Then come the beehives. You'd forgotten how quiet honey-making is. No sermons, no town meetings, just the gentle hum of thousands of tiny workers doing what they were born to do. You watch them sometimes, palms on your knees, marveling at how much peace fits into a thimble of sweetness. And in the quieter corners of your workshop, you carve toys, wooden rabbits, tiny sleighs, miniature spinning wheels. Your daughter finds them and insists they were left by forest spirits. You let her believe it. Honestly, part of you kind of does too. Once a week, the town gathers for what loosely resembles a market, not a formal affair, just benches, crates, and blankets spread across the green. People bring goods, stories, songs. You trade wool for dried pears, bread for a candle shaped like a duck. Someone performs a puppet show involving a dragon and a very confused goose. You laugh harder than you should. It's here in these moments that you notice something new. Pride. Not the loud kind, not flags and declarations, a quieter sort. You look around at the faces, some wrinkled, some rosy-cheeked, and think, we built this. Not with gold or power, with mittens and mallets and too many turnips. A visiting Englishman tries to sketch the market in charcoal. He gets the proportions all wrong, gives your friend Klaus a waist, but the sentiment is kind. He mutters something about industrious people. You pretend not to hear, but spend the rest of the day standing a little taller. One evening, after a particularly long day of baking, weaving, and arguing over whether turnip wine is a crime, you sit by the fire with a bowl of cabbage stew and watch the steam curl. Your wife leans against your shoulder, her hair smelling like ash and herbs. The children are asleep. Somewhere an owl hoots like it's drunk. You take a breath, deep and slow, and just before you drift off, you wonder if there's anything more holy than a clean house, a full stomach, and a village that hums with life, even if half that hum is geese.
You used to live beneath crests, carved lions, gilded eagles, scrolls of Latin etched above the doors of men who never once milked their own cows. But here in Pennsylvania, the only thing carved above your door is your name, wobbly, half-faded, and spelled slightly wrong. You don't mind. It's yours. The strangest part of this new life is that no one here wears a crown. Not in town meetings, not on the roads, not even when they argue. You walk down Germantown's main path, past log cabins and half-wild gardens, and realize there are no noblemen, no dukes, No prince electors, no powdered tax collectors demanding your grain by royal decree. Just farmers, weavers, widows, and stubborn men with plans. It's unsettling at first. You find yourself looking over your shoulder, waiting for someone to tell you that chopping down that tree or keeping that stray goat is a punishable offense. But the voice never comes. The only people watching are your neighbors, and they're just trying to make sure the goat isn't theirs. There's a town meeting every few weeks. It's held in a simple hall built with uneven timbers and optimism. Everyone attends, even the woman who claims her potatoes speak to her in dreams. You sit on benches that creak like nervous knees, and you listen. People speak up, some shyly, some like they've been saving their opinion since the boat ride over. And when they vote, they do it with hands, not swords, not threats. One man proposes a rule that anyone building fences must leave room for footpaths. Another wants to outlaw gambling, especially the kind involving turnips. No one really knows what he's talking about, but they pass the motion just in case. You raise your hand once to argue that pigs shouldn't be allowed to wander into other people's cabbage beds. The vote is unanimous, except for Klaus, who happens to own 6 of the guiltiest pigs in the colony. This is governance, but not like anything you knew in the old world. There are no wigs, no Latin speeches, no coins changing hands under tables. Just calloused people making slow, clumsy decisions about their shared future. Historians still argue whether these early democratic practices were revolutionary or accidental, born from the Enlightenment ideals or just desperate practicality in a place with too few judges. But to you, it feels like fresh air. And yet, this freedom, it itches. You don't always know what to do with it. You were raised to obey, to bow slightly when passing someone with a seal ring and polished boots. Now the only rings are for hauling buckets, and the boots are muddy on everyone. Some neighbors take to liberty like ducks to a pond. They start saying things like, "We decide," and "our land," with a confidence that makes you flinch a little. Others, you included, move slower, like people stepping onto a frozen lake, unsure whether the ice will hold. You begin to notice the little things, how your opinion, yes, yours, matters when the village discusses where to build a new well, how your name shows up on the church contribution list, even if it's spelled 3 different ways, how your kids come home from their lessons asking questions like, "Why don't we have kings here?" And you get to answer, "Because we don't need one." Your eldest son, only 10 and already strong as a mule, announces that one day he'll run for mayor. Your wife chokes on her broth. You smile and say, "Only if you stop leaving your boots in the hearth." The town grows, not quickly, but steadily. New settlers arrive, some German, some Swiss, a few even English. At first, they seem surprised by how well organized things are. You take pride in showing them the meeting hall, the grain store, the communal oven where Marta still reigns like a flower-dusted queen. You say, "We built this." And for the first time in your life, the word "we" feels like power. Still, old habits die hard. One day, a traveling official from Philadelphia stops by. He wears fine gloves and speaks with the careful tone of someone who's used to being obeyed. He questions your land deeds, glances at your boots, and asks whether the colony pays the crown its dues on time. Your neighbors stiffen, but no one bows. You stand beside Klaus, who, to be fair, probably still owes the crown a few pigs, and you say, "We pay our share." And it's true, you do. In taxes, in labor, in broken fingernails and prayers whispered while hauling water uphill. Later that night, you sit outside with your wife, your boots kicked off, your toes thawing near the fire.
She asks if you think this freedom is real. You stare up at the sky, now wide and star-dotted, and answer the only way you can. It feels like breathing with your whole chest. There's still hardship. Of course there is. Freedom doesn't stop wolves from howling at night or frost from curling the edges of your cabbage leaves, but it gives the struggle a reason. It lets you suffer with purpose. You're no longer surviving to serve. You're surviving to build. Your wife starts keeping a journal. Just scraps of notes, little phrases about the weather, the harvest, the neighbors. You catch her writing once. The people govern themselves here, not with swords, but with bread. She looks up and adds, except when there's sausage involved, then it's war. She's not wrong. As spring rolls in, you watch the town plant not just seeds, but new ideas. Someone sketches a schoolhouse plan, another carves benches for the market square. Children chase each other between rows of tulips, shouting in a mixture of German and English that somehow still makes sense. And as you sit back with a mug of cider, your shoulders finally relaxed, your hands calloused but clean, you realize something else. This isn't just your land, it's your beginning.
You don't talk about the war. Not out loud. Not often. But it follows you anyway, like a wind that never stops whistling through your bones. You feel it when the thunder rolls in too suddenly. You feel it when your child wakes screaming from a dream he can't explain. You even feel it in the way you wrap the breadcloth tighter than it needs to be, as if anything left uncovered might disappear. Back in the old world, you saw things no person should see. You saw houses burnt not once, but again and again, because one army didn't believe the other had already taken everything. You saw villages flattened like they were made of paper. You saw old men hanged from their own roof beams. You saw a horse drinking from a well filled with ashes. They called it the 30 Years' War, though to you it felt like a lifetime. One side shouted about religion, the other answered with fire. You stopped asking who was right when your uncle's orchard was turned into a burial pit. Historians still argue whether it was really a war of faith or just a mask for power. They debate strategies, treaties, kings with long names and short morals, but you know the truth. The war was hunger. The war was silence. The war was a child walking barefoot over a battlefield holding a doll with no head. Even now, decades later, in a forest on the far side of the ocean, it lingers. When a musket cracks in the woods, just hunters probably, you drop your bucket. When someone in town raises their voice too fast, you find your hand reaching for a tool, any tool. You don't need it, but the memory does. Your dreams are thick with smoke. Sometimes you see the shadows of the past step into your cabin wearing faces you loved. Sometimes you wake to your wife whispering prayers, the kind you thought you'd forgotten. And other nights, you wake her up, twice, with your muttering. She pretends not to mention it in the morning. That kindness is worth more than medicine. You're not alone in this. The whole town carries ghosts. Some are polite. Some kick over buckets and hide in the corners of your mind. Jakob, the man with the moon clock, still startles every time thunder rolls in. Marta once chopped all the heads off her chickens because one of them reminded her of a man she'd seen during a siege. No one asked for details. No one needed to. But there's healing, too, in small pieces. You walk through the garden and notice the tomatoes didn't die this year. You watch your daughter tie ribbons in her braids without asking if it's safe. You pass by your neighbor's house and hear laughter, real, full-throated, unafraid. It makes you stop. It makes you close your eyes. And the forest, once something you tiptoed through like it held teeth, becomes something different. You learn its sounds, the call of the mourning dove, the rustle of a raccoon, the hum of bees. You stop hearing threats and start hearing music. Not every day, but more often than you thought possible. One morning, while walking to check on your beehives, You see something curious, a circle of mushrooms, perfectly formed. You stare at it a long time. Back home, that would have meant something. Fairies, warnings, curses. You stand in silence. Then slowly, you step through the circle. Nothing happens, and yet something lifts. Later, when you tell your wife, she raises an eyebrow and asks if you're still drinking Klaus's cider. You laugh and say maybe, but you know it wasn't the cider. It was the choice to step forward, to stop flinching. Still, you keep certain habits. You never go to bed without a full canteen. You always leave one loaf of bread untouched on the shelf, just in case. You stack your firewood a little too precisely, like a wall waiting for siege. No one comments. Everyone understands. There are harder days, of course. Days when your boy trips in the field and you run to him too fast, too panicked. Days when smoke from the hearth reminds you of a burning chapel. Days when someone mentions a soldier and the room goes cold. But there are other days, better ones. You teach your children to build instead of hide. You watch your son help raise a roof, hands steady, eyes clear. You listen to your daughter sing while sweeping, a silly melody about frogs and shoes. You build them a swing between two pine trees. They squeal like foxes in spring. And you start to believe that maybe the war didn't follow you here. Not all of it. Maybe you carried it. Maybe now, piece by piece, you can put it down. You begin carving again. Not tools, not spoons, but shapes that don't serve a purpose. A bird, a tree, a tiny sheep. Your wife asks what they're for, and you just smile. You don't need a reason anymore. One day, the pastor gives a sermon on peace, not the kind promised by treaties, but the kind earned in silence. You stay after the service, standing in the back as everyone leaves. He walks past you and rests a hand on your shoulder, gentle and brief. You made it through, he says. You nod, but in your mind you whisper, not quite, not yet, but close. That night by candlelight, your son asks why you never talk about the old country. You hesitate, then you say, because we're building the new one. He doesn't ask again, and you're grateful. You sit by the fire, a folded scrap of paper in your lap, your thumb smudging the ink. It's a letter. Not the first, and not the last. You've written to your cousins still in Württemberg. You tell them everything is fine. You say the soil is good, the people kind, the winter manageable. You don't mention the wolves that stalked the pasture last month, or how you almost lost a toe to frostbite. Because hope needs a little exaggeration to survive. Letters home are your lifeline, your only way of holding the old world by the corners while trying to stretch a new one into shape. You write carefully, in long curls of script. You mention the bread, the births, the price of salt, and that yes, there is enough land for more. Your cousin Friedrich had always dreamed of owning an orchard. You say, here, you could have 5. Your wife reads over your shoulder and gently scratches out a sentence about the fever that swept through in July. No need, she says, for them to worry from across an ocean. You nod. You know she's right. But still, when your quill pauses over the part about the wild dogs or the old widow who froze before they found her, your jaw tightens. Some things are too heavy to mail. You ask them to send seeds. You ask them to send a recipe. You ask them to come. And then you fold the letter with shaking fingers, seal it with beeswax, and give it to a trader headed back toward Philadelphia, praying it survives a ship, a storm, and whatever passes for a postal service in 3 kingdoms and 2 ports. Historians still argue whether these early German letters were responsible for the second wave of immigration, or if people were already ready to leap, and your words were just wind behind their sails. But you
know the truth. You've seen how carefully your cousin's reply is tucked into the folds of his hatband when he arrives a year later, grinning and thin, carrying a sack and nothing else. When new families arrive, they lean in. They ask where the land is best, which neighbors are kind, what herbs grow fastest. You answer them honestly, mostly. You describe the river as beautiful, leaving out the part where Klaus fell in and was attacked by an extremely territorial goose. You say the roads are improving. You do not say they are muddy metaphors for disappointment. Still, it's not all caution. You take them to see the mill. You show them the apple trees, small but blooming. You point to the stone foundation of the schoolhouse and say, "My son helped lay that." Because he did. You help them build. You offer tools. You laugh when the nails bend, and you nod when their walls stand. And on their first Sunday, you invite them to the open-air service under the oak tree where the pastor's wife plays psalms on a dulcimer made from leftover shingles. Afterward, your wife gives the newcomers a loaf of dense rye and a jar of something pickled. She doesn't say what. That's tradition now. The children warm up faster. Within a week, they've joined the berry-picking cruise and started a contest to see who can jump from the tallest stump without crying. They speak half German, half giggle. It works. Not every arrival stays. Some come, glimpse the hard work ahead, and leave. Others leave because the work isn't the hard part. It's the waiting. For spring. For community. For belonging. You don't judge them. Not everyone is ready to live in a place that requires you to carry your courage like a second skin. And still, more come. More always come. You hang their letters on the inside of your pantry door, small scraps of proof that this dream isn't yours alone. Some are written by candlelight, some with poor spelling, but all with the same breathless tone. Tell us more. Tell us how you did it. Tell us what it's like to wake up without a master. You write back with both hands full, one still muddy from work, the other clutching a pen. You tell them it's not easy, that the rain doesn't listen, that the bears do, that sometimes you cry alone in the woods where no one can hear you except the squirrels, and they don't gossip. But you also tell them about the first time your daughter led the morning hymn, how your neighbor finally repaired his porch and now it doesn't collapse when you sit on it. You say the roads are improving. You do not say they are muddy metaphors for disappointment. One spring, you receive a letter that isn't written on paper, it's carved on a board. A cousin sent it because he ran out of ink. It's heavy, smells like herring, and takes 4 people to carry. You laugh so hard you almost dropped your cider. You hang it on the barn wall. Every time you pass it, it reminds you people back home still think of you, still dream of this place, still want in. You wonder how many will make it. You wonder how long before your German town becomes more than just German, before the Dutch arrive in numbers, or the Irish, or whoever sails this way next. You're not afraid of that future, but you feel it coming, like a river swelling before the thaw. And when it comes, you'll be ready. You'll offer bread. Maybe not your best batch, but something warm. For now, you keep writing. You write in the evenings while the stew simmers, and your children argue about whose turn it is to fetch water. You write in the margins of your wife's seed ledger, in the back pages of the family psalter, on bits of bark when the paper runs out. You write because someone, somewhere, still believes that this place, this rough, muddy miracle, is worth crossing oceans for. And honestly, you agree.
You're not sure when it starts, but one day you notice it. A rhythm in the year that didn't exist before.
a beat like the gentle rise and fall of someone breathing beside you. The seasons no longer feel like strangers. They're familiar now. You recognize the smell of spring in the thawing soil before you see the first buds. You can almost predict the moment the last frost will loosen its grip and the wild onions will peek up, pretending they're not in a rush. It begins with planting, always planting. Your knees in the dirt, your fingers wrapped around seeds so small they feel like doubts, but you press them into the ground anyway. That's what faith looks like here. Small actions, repeated despite the weather and the wolves. Your neighbors plant too. The whole community moves like a hive. Jakob sings a terrible song about rutabagas. Marta yells at crows in 3 languages. Children chase each other between the furrows, pretending to be forest spirits. You smile and think, this is what home feels like. Dirt under the nails and someone yelling about turnips. You build scarecrows, not because they work, but because they give you something to argue about. Klaus insists his needs a hat. You disagree. 2 weeks later, your cabbages are untouched and his are flattened. You don't say anything. You just tip your own scarecrow a little to the side. Style matters. Historians still argue whether early German settlers truly mastered their agricultural environments or simply adapted by stubbornness and trial. You could answer that, but you're too busy trying to remember whether you planted carrots in row 3 or if that's just where the kids buried a frog. Then comes the warmth. The long days when the sun clings to your back and the trees burst into color like they're showing off. You wake early, you sweat by noon, and you collapse into your chair by twilight, too tired to eat, too proud not to smile. Harvest is louder, more chaotic. Buckets overturned, beets mistaken for stones, a boy crying because the goat ate his turnip doll. But it's joyous chaos. There's music at night. Fiddles sawing out melodies you half remember from the Rhineland. Someone brings out apple schnapps. Someone else tries to dance. You make a mental note. Do not let Klaus teach your children how to waltz again. There's a harvest festival now. You didn't plan it, it just grew. A table in the square. Bread. A roasted something. Jugs of cider, laughter. One family brings sausages shaped like letters. Your daughter spells her name in meat. You pretend to be horrified. You are not. The pastor gives a brief speech. It includes a blessing, a history lesson, and a joke about the size of Marta's cabbage. She threatens to bean him with it. Everyone claps. Winter arrives quietly. First with the hush of frost on windows, then with the crunch of frozen ground beneath boots. You repair the roof. You stack the firewood higher. You mend to clothe and argue about whether wool or linen keeps out the draft better. The nights grow long. You burn tallow. You tell stories. Some are old, tales of foxes that steal names or castles that appear only in snow. Others are new, like the one about the man who tried to ice fish in a soup pot and fell through. Your children take turns reading by candlelight. The book is tattered, the words half familiar, but their voices are steady. You lean back, close your eyes, and let the rhythm wrap around you. Even the hard parts become part of the cycle. The sicknesses that come with wet seasons, the animals that vanish, the tools that break at the worst time. You stop fighting these things, not because you're passive, because you've learned some things return, some things don't. Either way, you plant again. You write the dates of first frost and last bloom on the inside of the barn door. At first, it's just for memory, but then you realize your son is copying them into his own ledger. He's building his own rhythm, his own sense of when the world turns. There's a comfort in the repeat, in knowing that no matter what happens in the wider world, kings dying, borders shifting, wars whispered through letters, the tomatoes need staking, the bees need checking, the fence needs mending, the ordinary becomes sacred. You've even started naming the seasons after events. The year of the quiet river, the winter Klaus tried to knit, the spring of too many eggs. These aren't headlines, they're stitches in the quilt of memory. Sometimes, during the stillest evenings, you walk to the edge of your field, look up at the sky, huge, uncrowded, and listen. There's nothing,
No horses screaming, no boots on cobblestones, just crickets, just wind. You don't miss the castles. You don't miss the crests. You miss your cousins, sure. You miss the bakery with the warm rolls and that one man who sang every time it rained. But you don't miss being small, not like before. Here, the world listens when you speak. The earth accepts your seeds. The fire accepts your wood. Your neighbors accept your voice, even when it trembles. And so, when the year begins again, and you find yourself holding seeds between your fingers once more, you close your eyes, breathe deep, and whisper to no one, "Yes, I'm still here."
You wake up one morning to a sound that doesn't belong. Not birdsong, not fire crackling, not even Klaus's early morning sneezing from the next house over. No, this is sharper, like metal on metal, a rhythm too deliberate to be natural. You sit up. You listen again. Hammers. You walk outside, squinting into the gray light, and you see them. Men in long coats, thick accents, and serious hats. They're building something just past the road, something taller than the barns, straighter than the cabins. It smells like authority. The town is changing. You can feel it in the gravel. What was once a handful of German families clinging to the edge of the woods is now a place, a settlement, maybe even a dot on someone's map back in Philadelphia. You remember when that wasn't true. You remember when the road to your cabin wasn't even a road, just a suggestion. Now there's talk of names, real names. Someone proposes New Heidelberg. Another says, too fancy. Your daughter votes for Goosefield based on a memorable summer incident involving Klaus's backside and a particularly vengeful gander. That suggestion is vetoed. Still, the fact that the town needs a name is its own kind of miracle. With growth comes rules, some good, some confusing. There's a new man, official looking, sent from somewhere you've never been, holding a clipboard and a list of building codes. He says, your chimney is 6 inches too wide. You say, it's 6 inches too warm. He doesn't laugh. Historians still argue whether the sudden formalization of frontier towns helped preserve culture or diluted it into bland uniformity. You know it's both. There's comfort in having a town hall, but there's also a certain joy you lose when potlucks become registered community gatherings. The pastor suggests setting up a school. You agree. It's time. Your children know their letters, but their grammar leans a little creative. You donate lumber. Someone else donates a chair with only 3 good legs. The children call it the throne. They take turns toppling off of it. The first schoolmaster arrives in a coat too clean for farm country. He frowns at your son's handwriting and insists on reciting moral lessons in Latin. The children respond by slipping a live frog into his boot. You pretend to scold them. You also give them extra apple slices that night. The town holds its first election. Everyone shows up, some in boots, some in bare feet, one man still wet from falling into a creek. They vote under the big oak tree. Marta bakes pies for the occasion. Klaus brings cider. Someone accuses someone else of stuffing a ballot in exchange for sauerkraut. Everyone laughs. It's the kind of scandal only a peaceful town can afford. But not all changes are cheerful. There's tension now and then when new families arrive who don't speak German. They bring different hymns, different dishes, different ways of fixing a wagon wheel. You try not to flinch when one family says grace in English. You try even harder not to feel betrayed when your daughter asks to learn their words. You remind yourself, you once spoke strange words here too. You don't forget your roots. At the town meeting, you stand up, awkward, sweating, holding a folded piece of paper, and propose the first German day. Just one afternoon of old songs, old bread, old stories. A way to remember where it all started. It's approved unanimously.
On the day itself, you wear your father's vest, patched and tight across the chest. Your wife braids her hair like her grandmother used to. The children perform a small play involving a very confused pretend goat and a lot of improvised yodeling. It's terrible. It's perfect. By sundown, you sit with Klaus on a log, sipping cider and watching the stars come out. He leans over and says, "Think the stars look different here?" You shrug. Maybe. Or maybe we just finally get to see them. He nods. Back home, too much smoke. And you realize he doesn't mean chimney smoke. He means war, grief, silence, all the things that clouded the sky. The school adds German folk tales to its library. The town sign now says its name plain and bold, but underneath, someone carves a line in smaller script. Founded by the brave and slightly stubborn souls from the Rhine. You smile every time you pass it. Your oldest child starts teaching the younger ones how to tell stories. Around the fire, under blankets, with wide eyes and too many details. You listen, and you hear echoes of your grandfather's voice. His words pass through your father, through you, and now this. You're not just surviving anymore. You're layering history into the soil. The town may keep changing. It will get more streets, more languages, more buildings with signs that don't all end in Berg or Heim. But this, right here, this version of it is yours. You helped plant it. You helped build it. You helped name it. And in that quiet evening, as the wind shifts through the trees, you know something you didn't know before.
The smell hits you before anything else. Rich, spiced, and unmistakably festive. Your neighbor is baking again, this time for the midwinter celebration. She always starts early. She says it's because dough needs time to remember its purpose, which you're pretty sure isn't how yeast works, but you nod anyway. It's easier than arguing with someone holding a rolling pin. Celebrations here have shifted. Not disappeared, just evolved. Christmas still comes with candles and psalms, but now there's also a fiddle player who insists on inserting dance breaks between carols. Your youngest once confused Epiphany with Pig Fanny and now insists it's a holiday for bacon. You haven't corrected him yet. It's been a long winter. You help hang lanterns from tree branches around the town square. Someone accidentally uses bear grease instead of wax for one of the candles. You light it anyway. The scent is questionable, but the glow is beautiful. And isn't that a metaphor for this entire place? You gather with neighbors who used to be strangers, wrapped in wool, sipping whatever hot thing someone brought in a jug. There's laughter, bad singing, and at least one dramatic retelling of the time Klaus fought a raccoon with only a wooden spoon. You're pretty sure that story grows another raccoon every year. Still, the gatherings mean something. They mark the passing of time. They give structure to the chaos, like knots on a rope stretching across the years. Historians still argue whether frontier celebrations were more about cultural retention or community survival. You suspect they're the same thing. When everything else feels unfamiliar, bread that tastes like your grandmother's is practically medicine. The children have their own games now. Snowball wars, icicle duels, and a very confusing tradition involving frozen carrots and coded messages. No one knows how it started. No one wants to stop it. You catch your daughter writing a poem by candlelight. It's in German, but the grammar is tangled with English. You ask if she wants help. She says no, it's better this way. You look over her shoulder. It's about snow falling on 2 countries at once. Your throat tightens. Spring returns slowly and then all at once. Meltwater carves patterns in the dirt roads. Shoots burst from soil like they've been waiting all winter just to show off. You rake, you shovel, you swear quietly when the chickens escape. It feels good to move again. With spring comes visitors. Traders, missionaries, cousins from other towns. They arrive with news, sometimes wrapped in joy, sometimes shadowed in grief. A war over there, a new tax over here. You listen, you nod. You try not to let the outside world creep too far into the marrow of your peace. But it's hard. One traveler brings a newspaper printed in English. It talks about how your people are stubborn, un-American, too clannish. You laugh, but it sticks in your throat. You wonder what they'd say if they saw your son helping build the town well, or your wife teaching both German and English hymns to children whose parents arrived just last year. You put the newspaper in the fire. It burns slowly, stubbornly. Still, the town grows. A second street is planned. Someone suggests paving. Marta threatens to revolt if it interrupts her goose's walking path. Democracy is alive and well. You build a new barn. This time, it has real shingles and a pulley system that makes you feel like a wizard. Your neighbor builds a cider press so efficient, you wonder if it's legal. You trade him extra apples for use of it. He accepts, but only if you promise to never let Klaus near it unsupervised. That spring, a child is born during a thunderstorm. The midwife names her Blitza. You think it's ridiculous. You also knit her a tiny blanket. There are whispers now of something bigger, a railway, perhaps, or a canal. People argue about what it would bring. Opportunity, outsiders, noise, change. You're not sure yet, but you know the town can handle it. You've watched it handle worse. On the first really warm day, you gather everyone by the river. There's no reason, just sunshine and a shared desire not to work for a few hours. You bring bread. Klaus brings a harmonica. The children strip off shoes and wade into the shallows. Someone starts a game of toss the gourd. No one knows the rules. The gourd eventually floats away. Everyone claps. As the sun dips low, you find yourself lying on a blanket, head resting against your wife's shoulder, listening to the murmur of neighbors, the gurgle of the stream, the wind weaving through branches. You feel the weight of everything you've built pressing against your bones. But it's a good weight, like a coat made from your own story. Later, walking home in twilight, your son asks, "Did you ever think it would feel like this?" You pause. Like what? Like, we're not visitors anymore. You ruffle his hair. "No," you say softly. "I didn't think it would, but I'm glad it does." You pass the old oak tree, the one where the first service was held, the first vote cast, the first argument over potato salad resolved. You touch its bark as you walk by. Not out of superstition, out of thanks. It's not the tree that changed. It's everything around it. And somehow that includes you. The smell hits you before anything else. Rich, spiced, and unmistakably festive. Your neighbor's baking again, this time for the midwinter celebration. She always starts early. She says it's because dough needs time to remember its purpose, which you're pretty sure isn't how yeast works, but you nod anyway. It's easier than arguing with someone holding a rolling pin. Celebrations here have shifted. Not disappeared, just evolved. Christmas still comes of candles and psalms, but now there's also a fiddle player who insists on inserting dance breaks between carols. Your youngest once confused Epiphany with Pig Fanny, and now insists it's a holiday for bacon. You haven't corrected him yet. It's been a long winter. You help hang lanterns from tree branches around the town square. Someone accidentally uses bear grease instead of wax for one of the candles. You light it anyway. The scent is questionable, but the glow is beautiful. And isn't that a metaphor for this entire place? You gather with neighbors who used to be strangers, wrapped in wool, sipping whatever hot thing someone brought in a jug. There's laughter, bad singing, and at least one dramatic retelling of the time Klaus fought a raccoon with only a wooden spoon. You're pretty sure that story grows another raccoon every year. Still, the gatherings mean something. They mark the passing of time. They give structure to the chaos, like knots on a rope stretching across the years. Historians still argue whether frontier celebrations were more about cultural retention or community survival. You suspect they're the same thing. When everything else feels unfamiliar, bread that tastes like your grandmother's is practically medicine. The children have their own games now. snowball wars, icicle duels, and a very confusing tradition involving frozen carrots and coded messages. No one knows how it started. No one wants to stop it. You catch your daughter writing a poem by candlelight. It's in German, but the grammar's tangled with English. You ask if she wants help. She says no, it's better this way. You look over her shoulder. It's about snow falling on 2 countries at once. Your throat tightens. Spring returns, slowly and then all at once. Meltwater carves patterns in the dirt roads. Shoots burst from soil like they've been waiting all winter just to show off. You rake, you shovel, and you swear quietly when the chickens escape. It feels good to move again. With spring comes visitors, traders, missionaries, cousins from other towns. They arrive with news, sometimes wrapped in joy, sometimes shadowed in grief. A war over there, a new tax over here. You listen, you nod, you try not to let the outside world creep too far into the marrow of your peace. But it's hard. One traveler brings a newspaper printed in English. It talks about how your people are stubborn, un-American, too clannish. You laugh, but it sticks in your throat. You wonder what they'd say if they saw your son helping build the town well, or your wife teaching both German and English hymns to children whose parents arrived just last year. You put the newspaper in the fire. It burns slowly, stubbornly. Still, the town grows. A second street is planned. Someone suggests paving. Marta threatens to revolt if it interrupts her goose's walking path. Democracy is alive and well. You build a new barn. This time, it has real shingles and a pulley system that makes you feel like a wizard. Your neighbor builds a cider press so efficient you wonder if it's legal. He trades him extra apples for use of it. He accepts, but only if you promise to never let Klaus near it unsupervised. That spring, a child is born during a thunderstorm. The midwife names her Blitza. You think it's ridiculous? You also knit her a tiny blanket. There are whispers now of something bigger, a railway perhaps, or a canal. People argue about what it would bring. Opportunity, outsiders, noise, change. You're not sure yet, but you know the town can handle it. You've watched it handle worse. On the first really warm day, you gather everyone by the river. There's no reason, just sunshine and a shared desire not to work for a few hours. You bring bread, Klaus brings a harmonica, the children strip off shoes and wade into the shallows. Someone starts a game of toss the gourd. No one knows the rules. The gourd eventually floats away. Everyone claps. As the sun dips low, you find yourself lying on a blanket, head resting against your wife's shoulder, listening to the murmur of neighbors, the gurgle of the stream, the wind weaving through branches. You feel the weight of everything you've built pressing against your bones. But it's a good weight, like a coat made from your own story. Later, walking home in twilight, your son asks, "Did you ever think it would feel like this?" You pause. Like what? Like we're not visitors anymore. You ruffle his hair. "No," you say softly. "I didn't think it would, but I'm glad it does." You pass the old oak tree, the one where the first service was held, the first vote cast, the first argument over potato salad resolved. You touch its bark as you walk by, not out of superstition, out of thanks. It's not the tree that changed, it's everything around it. And somehow, that includes you.
You don't realize how long you've been here until someone new arrives and asks, "How long have you lived in this town?" And you pause, look around, and honestly have to think about it. You remember when there wasn't even a this town, just woods and hopeful rumors, and someone named Gertrude who insisted her cousin's cousin saw a bear walk on 2 legs like a man. You still don't know if that story was about wildlife or a distant uncle. Now there's a general store, 2 churches, because one denomination wasn't quite stubborn enough, a postmaster who wears 3 vests in summer, and a cemetery where the gravestones are starting to read like chapters of a long book. There's a rhythm to death here. A sadness, yes, but also a reverence. The way neighbors show up with bread, the way the bell rings slow and steady, the way even the children understand how to whisper without being told. You attend the burial of the man who gave you your first axe when you arrived. You still have the axe. You sharpen it every winter. You place your hand on the gravestone and murmur something small. Not a prayer exactly, more like thanks. Historians still argue whether the high mortality rate in early settler towns hardened communities or deepened their sense of shared purpose. You think of how the widow's house filled with food, hands, and warmth before the sun even set. You know the answer. Still, life presses forward. The bakery expands. The schoolhouse gets its first real bell, an actual one, not a pot on a string. Your daughter paints a mural on the inside wall. It includes a unicorn, a thundercloud, and what appears to be a slightly offended-looking potato. Art is subjective. You build a bench in front of your home. Not for rest, really, just to sit and watch. Children race past, dogs bark, occasionally a horse escapes and creates a thrilling 5-minute chase. Life's noise has changed from survival clatter to community hum. A man from a nearby county visits to record your town's growth. He's writing a book, he says, wants to know the secret. You shrug. We keep showing up. He laughs and asks for more detail. You tell him about the year you built your barn with borrowed nails and 4 arguments. He takes notes. That spring, your son asks to leave. Not forever, just to visit another town, maybe see the city. You don't stop him. You help him pack. You slip your old compass into his bag. He hugs you like a man and stumbles like a boy. When he's gone, the house feels lopsided. A few days later, your daughter says she wants to become a teacher. You say, of what? She says, everything. You nod slowly, as if that's not the most terrifyingly ambitious thing you've ever heard. The town votes to build a small library. You donate a crate of books, some missing pages, most written in German. You label them Adventure, Mystery, and Mysterious Adventures. The children devour them. A few even return the books with extra notes in the margins. One copy of The Shepherd's Cloak comes back with doodles of sword fights and a dancing cow. You approve. There's a fire that year, a dry spell. A single spark from the blacksmith's forge, and suddenly the sky's painted orange. But the town doesn't panic. Buckets pass hand to hand. Blankets soak in troughs. You lose one shed. Your neighbor loses his entire side porch. Klaus loses his hat again. No one dies. That's the miracle. That night, the town gathers, not to grieve, but to rebuild. Wood is shared, bread passed around. A song breaks out. Off-key, too fast, perfect. You look around and realize this isn't just resilience, it's love. Stubborn, blistered hand, sing through smoke love. One morning, you notice your beard is more gray than not. Your back aches in the mornings. Your wife cheeses you about it, but hands you willow bark tea without asking. You sip it slowly, grateful. A boy from the school interviews you for a class project. He asks what you think of the town's future. You think about airships and letters that travel faster than horses. You think about your son's postcard from the city so bright he couldn't sleep. You say, I hope they remember how to sit still. Later, you write your name in the family Bible, just your name, no flourish. And under it, the names of your children. And beside each name, a story. Not because anyone asked for it, but because someday someone will wonder where all this started. And you want them to know.
By the time the leaves begin their golden tumble again, you've learned to measure life not in years, but in cycles. Planting, harvest, first frost, thaw. A rotation as steady as the sun and just as full of surprises. There's a cool breeze this morning,
the kind that whispers about changes before you're quite ready for them. You step outside with your walking stick, your son's gift now smoothed by your fingers, and you survey what's become of your world. The same home, the same sky, and yet you can feel time pushing gently at the edges of everything. The store now carries canned peaches. You don't quite trust them. Too sweet, too yellow. Your wife insists they're perfect for baking. You pretend to disagree just to hear her sigh and call you stubborn. You visit the school again. The building is larger with glass windows now. Imagine that. And desks that don't creak like old knees. The teacher greets you warmly, introduces you to the class as someone who helped build all of this. One boy asks if that means you're very rich. You laugh so hard you have to sit down. But it makes you think, not about gold or silver, but about wealth measured in footprints left behind. You helped dig the first well, lay the first road, shape the first law. Your story isn't written in ink, it's built into the soil. Your neighbor's boy, Jacob, wants to build a windmill. Not just any windmill, a tall one with slats he carved himself and a rotating gear made from an old wagon wheel. You watch him work, lips pressed in determination, sawdust in his hair, and you recognize something ancient in his eyes, that same mad hope you once carried across an ocean. Historians still argue whether frontier innovation was born from necessity or curiosity. You know better. It's both. No one tries to invent a windmill unless they need one, and also believe it might actually work. And yes, sometimes it doesn't. Klaus's attempt at an automatic egg collector ended in chaos, feathers, and a permanently suspicious rooster. The contraption now lives in the town museum under the label "Do Not Attempt." Autumn deepens, and with it comes the harvest celebration. There are banners now, handmade from scraps and stitched with love. Tables grown under pies, roasted meats, pickled everything. The children put on a play about the town's founding, complete with fake beards and exaggerated accents. One child shouts, "We will survive!" in such a thick tone that you nearly drop your cider laughing. Later that night, as the embers aid, the mayor reads aloud from the town's founding ledger. Names flicker in the firelight, some familiar, some almost lost. Yours is near the top. You feel a ripple of silence after he speaks it. Then someone starts clapping. The rest follow. You don't quite know where to look. There's a new post route now, faster, more direct. Letters come from cities you've never visited, places with factories, railroads, and strange electric lights. Your son writes of these things with excitement, but you notice he still signs off the same way. Love you, always, from your boy. One envelope carries a photograph, your first. It's black and white, a little grainy, but unmistakable. It's your son, standing beside a sign that says progress. He looks older, proud, and a little tired. You place the photo on your mantle and stare at it for a long time, not because he's far away, but because somehow he's right here. A storm hits one night, loud and sudden, the kind that makes you reach for candles without thinking. You huddle with your family, laughing as wind rattles the shutters. The youngest grandchild insists thunder is the sound of giants bowling. You tell her she's probably right. After all, what else would giants do on a Tuesday night? When the sky clears, you step outside. The town glistens, wet and washed, like it's been born again. You walk slowly down the main road, now paved with gravel, past homes lit by oil lamps and warm with life. A cat dashes across your path. Somewhere, someone plays a lullaby on fiddle. It's off-key. It's perfect. You reach the old oak tree, the one from the beginning. Its trunk is thicker now. its bark a map of years. You place your palm against it. You feel something stir beneath. Memory, maybe, or just wind. Either way, it feels holy. And that night, when you lie in bed, you listen to the quiet. Not empty quiet, but full. The kind of silence made by generations breathing in rhythm. You think about how you used to wonder if you belonged, if this land would ever feel like home. You smile now, knowing the truth. Home wasn't something you found. It was something you built, piece by piece, season by season, with stubborn hands and a heart that refused to leave. Tomorrow, you'll rise early again. Not because you have to, but because you still want to.
The snow comes early this year, soft at first, like powdered sugar over rooftops, then heavier until paths disappear and every sound is hushed by a thick white blanket. You stand at your window before sunrise, sipping tea that tastes faintly of cloves, watching the light turn blue, then gray, then gold. This town, you think, wasn't supposed to last. That's what people said. Too cold, too far, too German. But here it is, creaking, cracking, laughing into yet another winter. The bakery sells little cinnamon stars wrapped in wax paper. Children's boots stamp paths from the schoolhouse to the church to the pond where skating begins as soon as it's thick enough, and sometimes before. Your granddaughter leads the skating, arms outstretched like wings, scarf trailing behind her like she's flying. She's fearless. You remember when you were too. A historian visits from Philadelphia. She's writing a book on early German settlements. She wears large spectacles and writes everything down. She asks about architecture, about language, about loss. You show her the shed you built in your first year. She frowns and says it leans somewhat dangerously. You nod and say, "Don't we all?" Still, she seems impressed. She takes photos of your garden gate and asks for your wife's pickle recipe. You think, if the world wants to know what happened here, let them start with pickles. The town now holds Christmas markets, rows of handmade toys, quilted mittens, carved wooden animals. Some of the newer stalls sell things you don't recognize, little electric gadgets, colored wax shaped like fruit. But beside them are the old comforts, smoked sausages, mulled cider, and warm greetings that still begin in German before switching to English halfway through a sentence. Frohe Weihnachten, Merry Christmas. It's a sound you've come to love. One child asks if St. Nicholas still brings oranges. You say yes, but only to those who sing. The boy belts out a slightly tragic version of O Tannenbaum and receives 2 oranges for his effort. It's enough to make him a legend in the schoolyard for weeks. Historians still argue whether holiday traditions in immigrant towns were adapted for survival or simply retained out of nostalgia. You think it's neither. It's joy, pure and unruly. People cling to what warms them. And sometimes, that's cinnamon bread shaped like a boot. You catch a cold in January. Nothing serious, but you're forced to rest. You hate it. Every creak of the floorboards tempts you out of bed. Your wife threatens to tie you down with the quilt. You consider that not entirely unpleasant. During those days, neighbors visit. Some bring broth, others just stories. They talk about weather and church, and the time Klaus accidentally set fire to his beard. You never tire of that one. But beneath it all is something deeper, a shared knowing, a recognition that you are one of the first, and soon, one of the last. Still, you heal. You return to the rhythm. A new schoolhouse is under construction. Brick this time, 2 stories. Your daughter helps design the windows to catch morning light. You visit the site with your walking stick and lean against the old rail fence, watching the next chapter rise from the frozen earth. One boy stops hammering and runs over. "Is it true you helped plant the first orchard?" You nod. Also true I ate half the apples before they were ripe." He grins.
then dashes back to work. You're invited to speak at the town's Founders Day gathering. You wear your best coat. It still fits, if barely. Standing before the crowd, you suddenly forget every wise word you rehearsed. So you speak plainly. You tell them you were scared when you came here, that you stayed because someone brought you soup, that the road was never smooth, but always worth walking. And then you sit down, and the applause is soft and kind, like snow falling on pine. Later, a girl, no older than 6, tugs your sleeve and asks, "What's your favorite season?" You think for a long time. Whichever one is next. Spring will come again. The snows will melt, the streams will trickle, and somewhere, someone will plant a seed and wonder if it will take root. It will, because you did, and now this place remembers how.
The seasons pass now like pages in a familiar book, comforting in rhythm, even as the ink begins to fade around the edges. You wait each morning before the rooster, your joints stiff but not rebellious. You dress slowly. Everything is slower now, but you like it that way. The silence between steps, the warmth of the stove as it creaks back to life, the soft hush of steam rising from your tea. Outside, the town is beginning to stir. The baker lights his ovens with a yawn. A horse's hooves echo against cobbled streets still slick with morning dew. And in the square, the fountain you once helped dig flows as always, as though it's unaware how many decades have passed since you last bent beside it with a shovel and a prayer. That day comes back to you, mud caked to your boots, the mayor's hat blowing off in the wind, your neighbors singing out of tune while laying the last stone. The pipe burst 3 times before it held. You remember how the water finally surged up like a blessing. You remember laughing until your stomach ached. And now that same fountain quietly watches over children chasing each other in circles, their shrieks of joy echoing between storefronts and spruce trees. You still walk that path, not every day, but often enough, down by the weaver's porch where skeins of dyed wool hang like prayer flags, past the cobbler's shop, now run by his son, whose hands are just as steady, but whose shoes lack that mischievous little curve in the toe. You tap your cane on the stones as you go, not because you need to, but because it makes a pleasing rhythm. The church bells chime at midday. You don't always go inside anymore, but you always pause when they ring. That sound has measured your life. It sang over births and funerals, over wartime prayers and peace feasts, over your own wedding, outdoors, remember? You wore a coat 3 sizes too big, and she wore violets in her hair. The bells were louder than the pastor's voice, and everyone took that as a sign to kiss. These days, your wife's hair is silver and pinned in soft braids. She still wakes before you, still sings while she bakes, still tells you your beard is getting wild, and then, when you refuse to trim it, she kisses your cheek anyway. Love, you've learned, is just stubbornness turned gentle over time. At home, the old routines are still sacred. You chop kindling while she kneads dough. You sweep the stoop, she gathers herbs. You both pause often, sometimes in mid-task, sometimes mid-thought, just to listen to the wind or watch the sky, or marvel at how many birds seem to know their names. Inside, there's a quilt on every chair and a memory in every drawer. The floorboards groan familiar complaints. The fire crackles with a personality all its own. Your grandchildren call it the cozy house, though you still hear your father's voice calling it the shack back when the roof leaked and the walls wept sap in winter. Speaking of grandchildren, one of them, the bold one, comes visiting that spring with paint on her apron and a dream in her eyes. She says she wants to document the town before it forgets itself. You smile and tell her good luck,
but she's already sketching your neighbor's barn, already telling stories that may or may not be true. You let her draw you one evening, sitting in your rocker, pipe unlit, gaze soft. She captures the lines on your face so tenderly it makes your heart ache. A new tradition begins that summer. Opal walks. Children gather outside your gate just after supper, and you lead them down the familiar paths, telling stories as you go. About the old mill that once ran on stubbornness and river grit. About the thunderstorm that split the church steeple right down the middle, like a divine haircut. About the raccoon that stole your apple pie and left behind 2 corn cobs and an apology, or so you claim. They hang on every word, even the older ones who pretend they're too grown to care. And when you reach the orchard and let them pick 1 apple each, only 1, they always say thank you, even when they forget their manners at home. Historians still argue whether the German communities of early America truly blended into the melting pot or remained their own separate broth. But you know that broth held flavor, sour, spicy, soulful, and those who tasted it never quite forgot it. You didn't erase your roots to belong, you planted them deeper. The town, meanwhile, blossoms in unexpected ways. The general store now stocks canned peaches and liniment, and a curious device called a kerosene refrigerator. You have no idea how that works, but the owner swears by it. The library expands thanks to a donation from a distant cousin who made good in Philadelphia. The mayor gets a bicycle and rides it like he's leaving a parade even when he's just going to check on the post office. And the school. Oh, the school. 2 stories now, painted cream with red shutters. Your youngest great-grandchild starts there this year. You walk her to the gate on her first day. She clutches your hand until the last second, then runs in without looking back. You stand there longer than you mean to, until the bell rings and even the birds fall silent. Back home, your wife brings out a box of old letters. Together you sort them, some from family long gone, some from friends who left for cities or farms farther west. One letter, yellowed and sealed with cracked wax, you don't recognize. You open it. It's from your cousin in Germany, dated over 50 years ago, thanking you for a package of pickles and describing the first signs of unrest across Europe. You read it aloud, your voice catching only once. You keep that one aside. The past doesn't come crashing in anymore. It drifts, like wood smoke, like a tune you once knew and now hum without thinking. That autumn, your name is added to the town's cornerstone. A new hall is being built, and they insist on honoring the oldest surviving settler. You protest, of course, but a little part of you, perhaps the boy who crossed the Atlantic holding his father's coat too tightly, feels proud. Not of fame, of permanence. A week later, at the dedication, you're asked to speak. You climb the steps with help, take the podium, and glance out at a sea of familiar and unfamiliar faces. You say what you know. I didn't build this town alone. I just stayed long enough to see what everyone else built together. They applaud, but the part that sticks with people is what you say next. And if any of you have extra pie, I live 2 doors down. That gets the real applause. Later, you and your wife sit outside watching the stars emerge. She rests her head on your shoulder, and for a while, neither of you speaks. There's a comfort in that silence, not emptiness, fulfillment. A life carved out of timber and hope, lived among fields and faces, warmed by firelight and faith. And though the world beyond may change, may roar and rush and forget its stories, here, on this porch, in this town, beneath this quilt of constellations, you are remembered. You are rooted. You are home.
You've watched the world shift through 4 lifetimes now. It's early spring again, and the frost clings to the window pane like lace. Gentle, fading, familiar. You rise slowly, feeling every year in your bones, but you're not in a hurry anymore. There's no need. The fire is already lit, thanks to your youngest grandson who stopped by yesterday and left a neat pile of kindling and a note. See you Sunday. Don't go dying on me before we finish our checker match. You smile at that. His jokes aren't much better than yours were at his age. You make tea, not because you need it, just because your hands remember the motions. Heating the kettle, cradling the cup, breathing in the steam like it might whisper back memories. From the window, the town stretches before you, quiet and well-fed. Trees you once planted now tower overhead, their roots tangled with the bones of the past. The school bell rings in the distance. It's a different bell now, cast in a Pennsylvania foundry, but its song carries the same rhythm that stirred your children from bed all those years ago. Down the lane, someone's dog barks. A wagon creaks past, though fewer and fewer come through since the rail line opened. Change doesn't surprise you anymore. It arrives steadily now, not like thunder, but like snow. Soft, layering. Beautiful, if you learn to live with it. Your wife calls from the back room. Her voice is weaker than it once was, but still warm, still full of that same quiet authority that got you through the first year in America with nothing but a wet trunk and a prayer. You go to her, help with her shawl, and together you sit by the hearth. No need for words. Your days are a collection of glances, gestures, shared memories that need no retelling. But sometimes you speak anyway, repeating old stories as if polishing them one last time for the shelf. You tell her about the first barn raising, how you nearly fell from the roof beam because the shoemaker shouted that your trousers were on backwards. They weren't. Or the time the mayor got stuck in the town's first outhouse because he insisted on designing it according to scientific German proportions. You laugh. She coughs a little, then laughs too. Later you walk to the garden. It's still yours, though your knees argue otherwise. A few herbs still grow there, stubborn as ever. Sage, thyme, and chamomile. You plant something new anyway. A tiny sprig of rosemary, not for you, but for those who'll come after. A gesture. A memory in waiting. And that's when the letter arrives. Brought by a boy with one shoe untied and a nose smudged in ink. He says it's from Washington. You pretend to grumble about politics, but your hands are already unsealing the wax. Inside, neat German script from a great-nephew, now a clerk in the Treasury Department. He writes of debates over immigration, of senators who argue whether Americans should still speak foreign tongues, of fear stirred by war rumors in Europe. You trace each word with your finger. The same language your mother used to bless bread. The same language you spoke when you first kissed your wife beneath the old willow tree. And suddenly you realize history is not something behind you, it's beneath you, like a current, carrying your voice forward, your choices rippling through generations you will never meet. Historians still argue whether German Americans remained loyal to the old country or to the new, but you know that loyalty isn't about flags or speeches. It's about what you build, what you protect, what you leave behind in the hands of others. You walk to the cemetery later that week. It's not a sad place to you, just quiet, just full of stories. The older stones are lopsided now, inscriptions worn soft by rain and kime, but you know each name. You murmur them like a liturgy, one for the baker who gave bread to soldiers, one for the midwife who delivered 50 babies in 1 year, one for the child who died in winter, wrapped in the pastor's own coat.
Your name is already there too. Not carved, just penciled in the church ledger beside your birth date and the note, still active. You laugh at that, still active, as if a man who needs 3 breaks to tie his boots is somehow ready for adventure. And yet adventure finds you. Your granddaughter brings a camera the following Sunday. Not the bulky kind with a hood, but a sleek middle box she says is new technology. She wants to take a picture, not posed. Just you in the chair, pipe in hand, looking out across the yard. She says she wants to capture the soul of the town. You tell her that's ambitious for a girl who still can't boil an egg without help. She grins, takes the photo anyway. And in that frozen moment, eyes soft, mouth just starting to smile, you are suddenly every version of yourself. The boy who carved his name in a ship's beam, the man who split his first log in a strange new land, the father who wept in secret when his eldest left for college, the grandfather who now holds entire lifetimes like polished stones in his coat pocket. The photo will hang in the new library. They don't tell you that. They just do it. One morning, you wake to find the porch flooded with sunlight and a curious silence. The usual crows have taken the day off, it seems. You sit there with your tea, wrapped in a blanket that smells of lavender and ashwood. You begin to hum. It's an old lullaby, one your mother sang when you were too afraid to sleep in the attic back in Hesse. A tune about rivers and stars and coming home. You hum it again, then write it down. No one's asked you to, but you know someone, someday, will need it. That afternoon, the mayor visits. He's young, nervous, wearing a tie far too tight. He says the town is planning a memorial to the founding families. He asks for your thoughts. You tell him not to make it too grand. No statues, you say. Just a bench, a quiet one, under a tree. That way people will use it. He nods, then blurts out something about naming the new road after you. You wave him off. I've got my name on a pie recipe in the church cookbook. That's legacy enough. He laughs, but he's serious. The town votes. The sign goes up a month later. Hoffner Lane. You pretend to be annoyed. You're not. The final days come gently, not tragic, not sudden, just quieter. Shorter walks, longer naps, more tea, less need to speak. Your wife curls beside you each night, her breath like tide against your shoulder. Some nights you both wake, listen to the night sounds, then drift off again with fingers touching. You dream more, often of ships, sometimes of bread ovens. Once, strangely, of raccoons playing violins. You don't tell anyone about that one. And then, one morning, the breath doesn't return. You slip away with your hands folded across your chest, a smile just beginning on your lips, the scent of rosemary still on your sleeve. The whole town comes out. They sing, they cry, they laugh. Children leave apples on your porch. A letter arrives from Germany, unsigned, with just these words, "Thank you for staying." They bury you beside your wife, under the willow tree where you first kissed. The bench nearby is already worn smooth by years of use. And from time to time, someone sits there. A mother nursing a baby, a student sketching the school bell, a boy eating stolen peaches. And the town remembers. You are not a statue. You are the echo in the song of the bell. You are the recipe passed down. You are the bench beneath the tree. You are home.
So now, let your breath slow. Picture it all once more. The gray harbor in the old country, the creaking ship with tattered sails, the muddy streets of a brand new settlement, and the hands that shaped it into something enduring. Feel the softness of those first wool blankets. Hear the crackle of wood fires, the hum of hymnals echoing off log walls. Imagine the quiet joy of tasting bread you milled yourself, or of seeing a child read for the first time by candlelight under rafters you built. Let the story of that first stubborn settler drift through you, not loud or dramatic, but steady and sure, like footsteps in fresh snow. This was no grand empire, no gold rush, no conquest, just faith. Faith that home could be made, not inherited. That peace could grow from patience. That a legacy could be written not in wars or wealth, but in orchards, quilts, and streets lined with laughter. So wherever you are tonight, curled beneath a blanket, phone dimmed low, fan whispering nearby, know this: you carry the same spark. You are the descendant of dreamers, of builders, of people who crossed oceans and winters to make something good. And now, your only job is to rest. Let the sounds of the past hush you. Let the stillness of this night hold you. And if you listen closely, just beyond the wind, you might still hear him whistling in the orchard. Good night. Sweet dreams.